Just for a little while, sweetheart. Maybe Hope House can keep her until we get settled. My mother said it through the bedroom door at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, while I sat in the hallway in pajamas with a cartoon bear on the front. My brother was already in her car. My sister was already in my father's truck. I was the third child, the middle child, the one nobody had asked for. 2 days later, my parents drove me to a children's home behind a chain-link fence in Tucson, Arizona. They signed the intake forms without looking up. They told me they would be back in a few weeks. I was 8 years old. They did not come back in a few weeks. They did not come back ever. My 9th birthday passed in a building that smelled like bleach. My 10th. My 18th. 24 years later, on a Thursday morning in March, my phone lit up 41 times in 6 hours. My mother, my father, my brother, my sister. The 4 people who had divided me up like furniture they could not afford to keep. They had finally figured out that the daughter they had thrown away had built something they could not. This is the story of the folder I handed each of them across a long communal table at 7:14 p.m. on the day I let them in. My name is Sienna Hart. I am 32 years old. I own and operate a chain of artisan bakeries called Second Morning, with 8 locations across San Diego County, $4.2 million in annual revenue, and 47 employees. 12 of whom are former foster youth I hired on purpose, because I knew exactly what aging out of the system feels like in a city that does not return your calls. My business partner is a woman named Tessa Monroe, who I met at a farmer's market in 2018 when she told me my pricing was smiling like it was a personality trait. My fiancé is an architect named Adrian Cole, who has designed every store after my second one and who has met none of my biological family on any timeline. My dog is a senior rescue named Biscuit, who sleeps with her chin on my left ankle every night because I cried for 2 hours the day I picked her up from the shelter, and she has, for some reason, never let me out of her sight since. The name on my driver's license is Sienna Margaret Hart. The name on my original birth certificate is Sienna Lorraine Whitmore. I changed it the day I turned 18, 3 weeks before I aged out of the foster system, in a courtroom in Pima County, with a public defender who had volunteered 2 Saturdays of his own time to walk me through the paperwork, because I had no relative willing to sign as a witness. I do not tell most people any of this. I told Adrian on our 4th date. I told Tessa the night we signed the lease on store number 2. I told a local paper, in March of 2026, in a 1,400-word interview, every detail I had spent 24 years not saying out loud. That interview is the reason my phone lit up 41 times. Before we go further, if these stories move you, subscribe. Hit that like button. It costs you nothing, means everything to us. Now let me tell you about the night the door closed. My biological parents were named Marlene and Daniel Whitmore. Mom was 30 for the year she left me. Dad was 36. They had married at 22 and 24 in a church in Mesa, Arizona, in a wedding I have only seen in 3 photographs that survived the splits. Mom wore a dress with sleeves that were too hot for May. Dad wore a borrowed suit. They looked in those photos like 2 people who believed love was a renewable resource. It wasn't. By 2002, the marriage had been dying for 3 years. Dad had been a shipping manager at a warehouse on the edge of Tucson for 11 years. In April of 2002, the warehouse closed. Dad collected unemployment for 14 weeks. Then he stopped collecting because the eligibility ran out. He started drinking before noon by July. He stopped applying for jobs by August. Mom picked up extra shifts as a substitute teacher and took a second job stocking shelves at a Walgreens on Speedway Boulevard from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. 4 nights a week. We were 3 children. Owen, 11. Sienna, 8. Chloe, 4. I want to put a number on what I overheard, because the numbers are how I learned the math my parents were doing in their bedroom every night. The mortgage on the Tucson house was $1,180 a month. They were 3 months behind by September. The electric bill had been past due since June. Mom's substitute teacher checks were $640 every 2 weeks. Walgreens added $312 a week. Dad's last unemployment check had been $1,840 in August. Total household income, September of 2002, about $3,200 a month. Total minimum bills, $4,100. They were $900 short every month, and they were taking on $200 a month in late fees and credit card interest. I was 8 years old. I was standing on the stairs in pajamas with a cartoon bear on the front. I was learning, in real time, that adults talk about money in a particular tone right before they make a decision they are going to spend the rest of their lives describing as complicated. Mom's parents in Sedona had said no. Dad's brother in Phoenix had said no. The bank had said no. The county had a 6-month waiting list for emergency housing assistance. And then Mom said the sentence I have never been able to forget. She said, "Daniel, we can keep 2, we cannot keep 3. Dad said, "Then which 2? Mom said, "Owen comes with me. He's old enough to manage." "Chloe goes with you. She's small enough to carry." Dad said, "And the middle one?" Mom said, "Just for a little while. Maybe Hope House can keep her until we get settled." That sentence is the architecture of my entire life. The morning of the drop-off was a Thursday, October 17th, 2002. The light through the kitchen window was the color of orange juice. Mom had packed my clothes the night before. She had not folded them. She had stuffed them into a small duffel bag I had received as a gift from Dad's brother for my 6th birthday. She had included 2 stuffed animals, a brown bear named Wilfred and a smaller pink rabbit whose name I had never given because I had been saving it for the right moment. She had not included photographs. She had not included my favorite blanket. She had not included the small framed picture of my grandmother that had been in my room since I was 4. I asked her about the picture. She said, "Sienna, we don't have time." We drove to Hope House at 9:14 a.m. in Dad's truck. Owen was at school. Chloe was at our Aunt Lorraine's house in Marana. Mom rode in the passenger seat with the duffel bag on her lap. Nobody spoke. The radio was off. Dad's hands were at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel like he was taking a driving test. Hope House sat on the corner of Speedway and Tucson Boulevard behind a chain-link fence with green privacy slats. The front office had a fluorescent light that flickered. The woman at the desk was named Bernadette Olson. She was 56. She had a wedding ring that she rotated on her finger when she was nervous. She was rotating it the entire time we were in her office. Bernadette explained the intake process to my parents. She said they would need to sign 3 forms. She said the placement was being recorded as voluntary temporary care and that they could revoke it within 30 days at any time. She said visits could resume after a 14-day adjustment window. She said meals were at 7 a.m., 12 p.m., and 5:30 p.m. Dad signed the forms. He did not look up. Mom knelt down in front of me. She fixed my collar even though nothing was wrong with it. She said, "Sweetheart, we will be back as soon as we can. I promise I love you." She kissed my forehead. Dad reached down and patted my shoulder. They stood up. They walked out the door. The door closed. I stood in the office. Bernadette rotated her ring. I waited for the sound of the truck starting. I heard it. I waited for the truck to pull out of the parking lot. I heard that too. Then I waited for one long, impossible second for the truck to come back. It didn't. My caseworker was a woman named Ms. Vivienne Bell. She was 41. She wore soft cardigans. She had a voice like she was always trying not to wake a baby. 3 days after the drop-off, she sat me down at a small round table in the day room and slid a sheet of construction paper across to me. She said, "Sienna, sweetheart, I'd like you to make a thank you card for your mom and dad. To tell them thank you for arranging safe care for you while they get back on their feet." I looked at the paper. I looked at the box of crayons. I looked at Ms. Bell's soft cardigan. I said, "No." She said, "Sienna, honey, it's a nice thing to do." I said, "No, ma'am." She said, "Why not?" I said, and I remember this sentence at age 8 better than I remember anything I have said as an adult. Because they're not coming back, and a thank you card would be a lie, and my grandmother told me I should never lie. "Ms." Belle sat very still. Her hands stopped moving. She looked at me for a long second. Then she folded the construction paper in half. She put the crayons back in the box. She said, "Okay, Sienna, we won't do the card." I want to tell every adult watching this video something. The caseworker who asked me to make a thank you card for the people who had abandoned me was not cruel. She was a system trying to make a child apologize for being inconvenient. The woman behind the request was kind. The script she had been handed was not. There is a difference. Most cruelty wears the face of a tired person reading the wrong sentence out loud. I refused to make the card. I think it was the first decision of my actual life. The next decision came 11 months later, when nobody had visited and Ms. Bell, in a quiet voice during our weekly check-in, had to tell me that we may need to discuss long-term placement options. I asked her, point blank, did my parents come back at all? She said, Sienna, I have left them 17 voicemails since you arrived. I have not received a return call. That was September of 2003. I was 9 years old. I stopped sitting by the parking lot window after that. I lived in 4 foster placements between November of 2003 and August of 2012, when I aged out of the system at 18. Placement 1, the Holcombs, Tucson. 2-year-old twins of their own and 3 other foster kids. My clothes stayed in a black trash bag for the first 4 months because there was no dresser space. I slept on a fold-out in the den with no door. Mr. Holcomb was a long-haul trucker who was home 4 days a month. Mrs. Holcomb told me the 3rd week I was there, Sienna, make yourself scarce when family visits, we'd appreciate that. I lived there 19 months. Placement 2, the Briggses, Phoenix, 5 other foster kids in a 3-bedroom house. Food was the currency. Mr. Briggs, who was 58 and worked at a tire shop, would weigh the cereal box every Sunday night and threaten to dock anyone whose name was on a missing piece by Friday. I lost 6 pounds my first month. I started keeping crackers in my school locker. I lived there 14 months. Placement 3, the Lindquists. Mesa. This was the polished cruelty placement. Mrs. Lindquist, Adelaide, was 49, the wife of a regional Lutheran pastor, the kind of woman who baked casseroles for church drives and who wore real pearls to PTA meetings. In public, she called me sweetheart. In private, she would stand in my bedroom doorway at night and say things like, maybe if you were easier to love, somebody would have kept you. She never hit me. She didn't have to. She knew exactly where to press. I lived there 27 months. The exit point came when I was 14, and a school nurse noticed me clenching my jaw so hard my molars were cracking. The nurse, a woman named Marisol Quintana, who I sent flowers to at her retirement in 2024, filed a CPS report that triggered an investigation. The Lindquist's license was put on probation. I was moved. Placement 4, the Vegas, Tempe. This was the placement that finally let me breathe. Annette Vega, 52, divorced, no biological children, 2 adopted daughters from previous foster placements. Her house was small. Her rules were clear. Her food was reliable. She did not ask me about my family. She did not pity me. She did not try to be my mother. She was, instead, the first adult since my grandmother who treated me like a person instead of a placement. I lived with Annette from age 14 until I aged out at 18. We still talk every Sunday. She came to the opening of every second morning location. She is going to walk me down the aisle at my wedding to Adrian next April. She does not call herself my mother. I do not call her my mother. We have a different word for what we are. The word is family, and we built it from scratch. If you've been watching for a while, do me a quick favor, subscribe and hit that like button. Costs you nothing, means everything. 2 more people saved my life in those years. The first was a man named Chef Ramon Ellis. He ran the baking station at a Saturday church meal program in Tempe that the Vegas household sometimes volunteered at. He was 64, retired from a hotel kitchen in Scottsdale, with silver at his temples and flour on his shirt half the time. He showed me, the first Saturday I came, how to wake yeast in warm water that was 105 degrees, not 110, because 110 killed it, and how dough changed when you gave it time instead of force. The first tray of dinner rolls I pulled from the oven, when I was 15, made me cry because they had risen because of what I had done. They had transformed because I had followed every step. Care could lead somewhere. That sentence is the founding document of every business I have ever opened. The second was a high school guidance counselor named Mrs. Vivian Brooks. She was 47. She wore reading glasses on a beaded chain. She watched me, junior year, stay after lunch every Thursday to help cafeteria staff stack trays. She asked me, one afternoon in March of 2011, why I did it. I shrugged. She said, "Sienna, you don't like cafeterias, you like order, you like making things happen with your hands. There is a future for that." That was the first time an adult had described me without the word foster in the sentence. Mrs. Brooks helped me apply to a vocational program with culinary electives. Chef Ramon let me practice on his church kitchen's commercial mixers on weekends. By the time I aged out at 18, I had a duffel bag, a folder of paperwork no one had explained to me, a $4,200 community college scholarship Mrs. Brooks had personally lobbied the foundation for, and a letter of recommendation from Chef Ramon that said, "Sienna Hart bakes the way most people pray. With patience, with discipline, and with the absolute belief that what she puts in will come back." I cried over that letter on a city bus in San Diego in September of 2012. I have it framed in my office at the flagship store. I built something from nothing. I worked mornings at a diner. I sanitized equipment at a bakery on weekends until my fingers went numb. I lived in a shared apartment and ate toast and peanut butter for dinner more nights than I want to count. I saved $14,300 between the ages of 18 and 24, because nobody was going to inherit anything for me. And I was not going to wait for someone to choose me twice. In March of 2018, I started selling pastries at a farmer's market under a folding table I bought for $42. Honey sea salt rolls, brown butter muffins, cardamom buns. By June, I was sold out by 9:30 a.m. every Saturday. A small bakery. That slowly became a business, then a brand, then something they couldn't ignore. That was where Tessa Monroe walked up. She took one look at my pricing board and said, "You're undercharging by 22% and smiling like it's a personality trait." Then she bought a cardamom bun and made me sit at her booth and explain my margins to her. 3 months later, we opened a breakfast window in Hillcrest. By month 6, we needed a second location. Adrian Cole came into the window in November of 2019. For 7 straight nights, he ordered a black coffee and a plain croissant. On the 8th night, he asked who made the orange rosemary scones. I said I did. He took one bite and closed his eyes. I laughed harder than I had laughed in 5 years. He asked me on a date for the following Tuesday. He has not let me down once in the 7 years since. I want to be honest about the next part because the magazine versions of this story always smooth it out. I had panic attacks for the first 18 months second morning was open. I would wake at 3:14 a.m. convinced the entire business was about to collapse. I would sit on the bathroom floor while Biscuit pressed against my leg and Adrian made me herbal tea. I had been trained by every adult in my childhood to expect that anything good would be taken back. Building a business requires you to bet, every single day, that the universe is not the foster system. I lost that bet some days. I won it more days than I lost. By 2022, we had 3 locations. By 2024, 6. By the end of 2025, 8. In February of 2026, a senior reporter named Imogen Sato asked for a long-form interview. I said yes. We met for 4 hours at the flagship store. I told her, for the first time in my adult life, the entire story. The drop-off. The thank you card I refused to make. The Holcombs, the Briggses, the Lindquists, the Vegas, Chef Ramon, Mrs. Brooks, the scholarship, the duffel bag. I gave her my biological parents' full names because I was 32 years old. My therapist had spent 8 years helping me build the muscle to do exactly this. And I had decided that the small dignity of being honest in print was worth more than the small protection of being polite in silence. The article ran on March 8, 2026. Front page of the Sunday Lifestyle section. My phone lit up the next morning. The first call came at 7:42 a.m. Unknown number. I let it ring out. Then another. Then another. By 9 p.m. there were 41 missed calls, 6 voicemails. The first was Owen. His voice was deeper than I had remembered. He said, "Sienna, it's me. It's Owen. I just read the article. I don't know what to say. I had no idea. Mom and Dad told us God, see? Please call me back, please." The second was Chloe. She cried for the first 80 seconds before she got out a single complete sentence. Sienna, I was 4, I am so sorry, I didn't know. The third was my mother. She said, sweetheart, I have spent 24 years thinking about you every single day. I sat very still in my office after that voicemail. I did not feel rage. I felt something colder than rage. I felt diagnostic clarity. 24 years thinking about me every single day and not one phone call, not one letter. Not one greeting card. Thinking about me is a sentence a person uses when they want credit for the work they did not do. The fourth voicemail was my father. He said, see, it's Dad. I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I have maybe 9 months, please. I want to make this right before I go. I did not call any of them back. I called Tessa. Tessa came to my office at 10:14 p.m. with a bottle of Cabernet, a notepad, and an expression I had only seen on her face twice before. She said, Sienna, I am going to spend the next 72 hours doing research on every one of those 4 people. You are not going to call any of them back until we know what we are walking into. Promise me. I promised her, within 72 hours. We knew everything, the debt, the illness, the lies. And why they were really calling me? The picture was ugly. Dad was drowning in medical bills. Mom had filed for bankruptcy. Owen had lost his job after an expense audit. Every one of them was arriving with a handout, except Chloe. Tessa wrote in the margin of Chloe's section, Sienna. This is the only one who is not arriving with a handout. I read the brief at my kitchen table on Sunday night. Adrian sat across from me. He did not speak. I read it twice. I closed it. I said, Adrian, they saw the article and recognized me as a landing pad. He said, Sienna, yes. That is what the brief says. I said, I am going to meet them. He said, okay. I said, I am going to meet them on my ground, on my terms, with documentation, with witnesses, and with a folder for each of them. He said, Sienna, I will be at the bakery at 6:45 p.m. to set up the back camera. He always is. Tuesday, March 17, 2026, 7:14 p.m., the Hillcrest flagship store, closed for normal business at 6 p.m. Lights dimmed to evening warmth. The smell of cold fermenting dough from the walk-in. Adrian in the back office watching a discreet ceiling camera. Tessa at a small two-top in the corner with her laptop open and her notebook labeled Whitmore Family Documentation, Day 1 in Sharpie on the cover. Annette Vega, my foster mother from Tempe, sitting at a third table near the door with a cup of tea and the expression of a woman who has personally raised a daughter through worse. I had asked Annette to come because the only mother in the room was going to be the one who had earned the title. The 4 of them arrived together at 7:11 p.m. They had driven up from Phoenix in Owen's wife's minivan. I watched them through the front window before I walked over to unlock the door. Mom was thinner than I had expected. Dad looked smaller than my memory of him, not just thinner, dimmer, like someone had turned a knob down on his actual presence. Owen carried himself like a man rehearsing apologies. Chloe stood slightly apart from the other 3 with her arms wrapped around her own elbows. I unlocked the door. I said, come in, sit at the long table. Nobody hugged me. Good. They sat at the communal table where strangers usually shared cardamom buns on Sunday mornings. I poured 4 glasses of water. I poured one for myself. I sat down at the head of the table. Mom spoke first, of course. Sweetheart. You look beautiful. I said, Mom, we are not here to describe my face. Why are you here? She started to talk about how hard it had been, how they had thought of me, how life had pulled them in different directions. Dad picked up the thread. He said he had been overwhelmed, broke, ashamed, drinking too much. Mom said she had thought I would be safer in temporary care than in the chaos. Owen said he had been a child himself and had been told over the years that I was with extended family and had only learned the truth in pieces over the last decade. Chloe did not speak. She looked at the table. I let them talk for 11 minutes. I did not interrupt. I had waited 24 years. I could wait another 11 minutes. When they finished, I stood up. I walked behind the counter. I came back with 4 manila folders, each labeled in clean black marker with a first name. Marlene, Daniel. Owen, Chloe, I placed 1 folder in front of each of them. I said, open them. Start at page 1, take your time. They opened the folders. Fix 4 applied, summarized instead of listing all pages. Every record, every move, every time they didn't come back, everything was there. The intake form with their signatures, the 17 unreturned voicemails from my caseworker, every placement transfer, the CPS report, the scholarship letter, Chef Ramon's letter, and the last page, written in my own handwriting, one sentence. You did not lose me, you left me. There is a difference, and you will live the rest of your lives inside it. They reached the last page, and that's when the room went silent. Mom started crying at page 2, Dad stopped reading at page 8, Owen made it to page 11 before he covered his face. Chloe read every page, slowly. All the way to 13. Then she closed the folder and put both hands flat on top of it and looked up at me. She said, Sienna, I was 4, I want to know my sister. I am not asking for anything else. Ever. I looked at her for a long time. I said, Chloe, we will start with coffee in 2 weeks. My city, you drive to me. We will see what is possible. She nodded. She did not cry harder. She did not press. She had heard exactly what I had said. Then I turned to the other 3. Mom started, sweetheart, I said, Mom, stop. I know why you're here. Tessa has the public records. I know you are not here because you finally remembered you had a daughter. You are here because the daughter you left turned into something that looked like rent money. Mom's hand went to her mouth. I turned to Dad. I said, Dad, the cancer is real. I am sorry it is real. I would not wish stage 4 on a stranger. I am also not going to pay for the assisted living facility. I know Owen drove past on the way here this afternoon. Dad's face crumpled. He had not expected me to know about the facility tour. I turned to Owen. I said, Owen, the answer is no. To all 3 of you. The answer is no to the medical bills. The answer is no to the loan. The answer is no to the soft loan you have not yet asked for, Mom. I said, I noticed everything. I have been noticing for 24 years. I just was not in a position to say anything out loud until last Sunday at 7:42 a.m. Then I did the thing that the original version of every story like this leaves out. The thing the comments on the Sunday paper interview had practically begged for. I told them what I was going to do next. I said, here is what is going to happen. You have, between the 4 of you, told approximately 300 different lies about me over the last 24 years. To your friends, to your neighbors, to your extended families. To my second cousins, who I have never met, who all grew up believing some version of Sienna is with family friends or Sienna is in a special school or Sienna chose to cut contact. Every single one of which is a lie. I put my hands flat on the table. I said, I have already given Imogen Sato, the reporter from the Sunday paper, your full names, the dates, the placements, and the documentation in those folders. She is publishing a follow-up piece on Sunday, March 22nd. The follow-up is going to name each of you. The article will have a copy of the Hope House intake form with your signatures as the centerpiece. Mom said very quietly, Sienna, please don't. I said, Mom, I waited 24 years to be allowed to tell my own story without your version sitting on top of it. The story is going out. You have until Sunday morning to call your relatives, your friends, and your neighbors and tell them the truth in your own words before they read it in mine. Dad said, you are going to humiliate us. I said, Dad, I am going to describe you. The humiliation is what describing you accurately does. That is not on me. Owen said, Sienna, there has to be another way. We are family. I looked at him, I looked at Mom, I looked at Dad. I looked at Annette Vega in the corner with her cup of tea, and at Tessa at her two-top with her laptop, and at the back office where Adrian was sitting with the camera feed. I said, Owen, family is the 4 people in this room who are not on your side of the table tonight. Family is the woman who taught me how to wake yeast. Family is the counselor who helped me apply for community college. Family is the woman who came to every store opening. Family is the man who has cooked me dinner every night I have been too tired to cook for myself for 7 years. Family is my dog. Family is the 12 former foster youth on my payroll who know exactly what aging out of the system feels like. Family is my sister Chloe, who I am willing to slowly know again because she was 4 years old when you left me. and 4-year-olds do not get to make decisions about other people's children. Chloe's shoulders shook. She did not lift her head from the folder. I said, family is a verb. You did not conjugate it once in 24 years. You do not get to claim the noun now. Nobody spoke. I sat down. I folded my hands. I let the silence finish what the sentences had started. After a long minute, Dad said, Sienna, what do you want from us? I said, Dad, 3 things. 1. Tell the truth to everyone you have lied to before Sunday morning. 2. Do not contact me again. Any future contact will go through Tessa, in writing, only if there is something specific and non-financial to discuss. 3. Get therapy, all 3 of you, for your own sake, not for mine. I have already done mine. I am not the project. He nodded. Mom said, Sienna, will I ever see you again? I said, Mom, I do not know. I am not making promises I have not earned the right to make. I am 32 years old. I have a wedding in 13 months. You are not invited. Maybe in 5 years there is a coffee. Maybe there isn't. I am not going to lie to you to make this room less hard. She nodded. She was crying without sound. They stood up. They left the folders on the table. They walked to the door. Chloe stopped at the threshold. She turned around. She said, Sienna, thank you for the coffee. I said, Chloe, drive safe. She did. The 4 of them walked into the parking lot. The minivan pulled out at 8:34 p.m. I locked the door behind them. Annette stood up from her table. She walked over without saying anything. She put her arms around me. I cried for the first time that night. Not for them. For the 8-year-old girl in the cartoon bear pajamas who had, finally, after 24 years, been allowed to be heard out loud. The follow-up article ran on Sunday, March 22, 2026, 2,200 words, page 3 of the lifestyle section. Imogen Sato's reporting was clean and devastating. The Hope House intake form ran as the centerpiece image. My parents' signatures were clearly visible. The dominoes fell in order over the next 90 days. Sunday, March 22, 11:14 a.m., my mother's pastor at the Mesa church she had attended for 14 years called her and asked her to step down from the lay leadership council. She did by Wednesday. Monday, March 23rd. Owen's wife Brittany, who Tessa had quietly emailed a courtesy copy of the article on Sunday morning, drove to my mother's studio in Glendale and demanded to know how much of the family savings discussion she had been included in over the past 8 years had been built on lies. Marlene admitted to Brittany. On a recorded call Brittany later sent me a transcript of that Sienna was given the choice and she chose not to come back. That was the lie that had been operating for 24 years. Brittany broke it open in one phone call on a Monday afternoon. Tuesday, March 24th, Brittany filed for separation from Owen. She told him she could not be married to a man whose family had built itself on the abandonment of his sister. She moved with their 6-year-old to her mother's house in Scottsdale. The divorce was finalized in November of 2026. Friday, March 27th. My father's GoFundMe was suspended by the platform after multiple commenters reported the campaign for material misrepresentation. The page was taken down. Dad moved into an assisted living adjacent apartment paid for by Medicare and a small VA benefit none of us had known he was eligible for. He passed away in November of 2026, 8 months after the bakery meeting. Owen called me to tell me. I did not attend the funeral. I sent Chloe flowers. April through June 2026, Marlene wrote me 4 letters. None of them apologized. All of them asked for help with the bankruptcy lawyer fees. I forwarded all 4 to Tessa. I did not respond to any of them. The 5th letter in July was different. It was 3 sentences long. It said, Sienna. I read the article again. I read your folder again. I am sorry. I do not expect a reply. I did not reply, but I kept that letter. It is in a drawer with Chef Ramon's letter and a photograph of Annette Vega and me at the opening of Store 6. Owen moved into a 1-bedroom in Tempe. Started couples therapy with Brittany, too late, but he did it. He sent me a card in August 2026. Sienna, I am working on understanding what I did and did not do, not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know. I responded. 3 words. Owen. Keep going. Chloe drove to San Diego on April 7, 2026. We met at a small cafe in North Park for 2 hours. We did not talk about mom or dad or Owen. We talked about her son, age 2, named Theodore. We talked about her work as a pediatric OT. She showed me a photograph of Theodore eating a strawberry. He had strawberry juice on his cheek. He was the first person in my biological family in 24 years that I felt anything resembling tenderness toward. We have coffee once a month now. She drives to me. She does not bring up the past. She brings me a small jar of the homemade jam Marcus, her husband, makes from his backyard apricot tree. The jam is, in fact, very good. I serve it at the flagship store on weekends. The label says Davies Family Apricot Small Batch. It is the only thing in the bakery with a family name on it. That is on purpose. The foundation. The Sienna Hart Foundation for Aged-Out Foster Youth was incorporated in May of 2026 with a founding endowment of $480,000. The foundation provides emergency housing assistance, vocational training stipends, and therapy vouchers for young adults aging out of the Arizona and Southern California foster systems. We funded 41 young people in the first year. We are funding 84 in the second. The first scholarship recipient, a 19-year-old young man named Marquise Calloway, who had aged out of 3 placements by age 17, works at the Hillcrest flagship store on weekends. He is enrolled at City College in San Diego. He is going to be the first foster system alum I have ever signed a letter of recommendation for. He is going to make it. I can tell. It is November 2026, 8 months since the bakery meeting. I get to the flagship store at 5:14 a.m. most days. I unlock the back door. I turn on the ovens. I make a small espresso in a chipped white cup. I sit at the back counter for 15 minutes before the bakers arrive. That is the only time of day I am alone with the building I built. Here is what I want to say. The cruelest people in your family are not always loud. Sometimes they are sitting at a kitchen table at 11:47 p.m. doing a math problem out loud about their own children, deciding which 2 are easy enough to keep. They use soft words. Temporary, just for a little while, until we get settled. Those words are not promises. They are eviction notices. If you were the kid who got left, listen. You were not too much. You were not the inconvenient one. You were a child whose parents made a math problem and decided you were the variable they could remove. They were wrong about the equation. You were the load-bearing wall they did not know how to read. Build the folder before you need it. Every voicemail, every transfer form, every name, every date. The folder is not paranoia. It is the receipt for a debt they will never acknowledge but cannot legally erase. And when, 24 years from the day they drove away, they walk into your bakery and ask you for the rent money your existence finally became, slide the folder across the table. Watch them read it. Let the silence do the work. You do not have to scream. You do not have to cry. You do not have to win. You just have to be holding the documentation when they finally understand what they are not holding. They didn't lose me. They left me. There's a difference, and they will live with it. Forever. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and join our community for more true life stories. We'll see you in the next one.